All right, welcome. Good morning, good evening, good night. Hello, everybody. I am Dave Darrington. I'm your host for Working Out Loud. And once again, this is a show, like I always like to remind everybody, that's evolved over time, but it's a spiritual successor to Vilka Shard's Helping Sales. We are now talking about technology, B2B SaaS, B2B, B2C SaaS, all the things in the space that's really difficult. The thing about software, the thing about the jobs we do in this industry is that if we are not learning, and this doesn't mean our customers, just our partners or us, if we're not learning all the time, we're churning. Remember, you could be using between 5 to 9 different applications on average. Most working adults in software or in our industries are working with 9 applications, solid B2B SaaS applications every single day. So we're going to learn about that. And today, what I'm going to do is bring in my friend, Rod Cherkas. Rod, say hello to the audience.
Hi, Dave. Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Thanks for accepting the invite to be on the show. Actually, I think we were talking for a while. And let me go ahead and frame this up. If once again, I want to break the fourth wall and say, hey, if you're out there, you're listening, I'm watching this on live stream right now, so I know it's happening. Get in the chat. We are going to be taking questions and we want your participation live. Rod, today we're going to talk about your new book. You have a copy you can hold up for us?
I do.
Yeah, and you got it printed. I saw that. When did it come through?
It launched on February 1st, and it's available on Amazon on both Kindle and paperback.
I saw it. Well, one of the things that I've been doing, Rod, lately, and actually via C-Lab, the sister podcast, is we've been going through books that help us in this market. And this is one I'd like to add to the collection now because, well, let me frame it up as my friend Adam Evermescu always says. I always like to say that. To frame up this conversation, I've been thinking about our journey together, right? We haven't always been together in the same company, although we did have an overlap. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's important here is that this rise of software as a service happened. It's been going on over time. Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world. Mark from Netscape fame or infamy. Today we're going to be talking about, we're going to niche in down into leadership. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about this role of the chief customer officer. You might hear a CCO and go, all right, what is this? What is this role? Where are they coming from? What do they do? Why does it matter? And if I were to frame this up before we really get into your interpretation of it, myself, I've gone through roles over the last decade plus, really focusing on software as a service, and have had this journey around it. I was really fortunate and lucky to have spent time at the emergence of Gainsight, right? You worked there as a leader there. And oh my gosh, that's changed my mind about everything and myself, my ability to manage and lead, and my interest in growing. Many people I see, we have several leaders on the call here. Hello, Debbie. Hello, Kevin. Hello, Christine. Everybody's on this journey together. And what I really wanted to do is kind of use your book. Let's talk about your cool book and how it's helpful in framing our careers. And even like if you want to be a CCO or you're curious about it, and even more, how we interact and transact, and how this role is really important to our software lives today. So with that, Rod, why don't I let you take the stage here, introduce yourself at depth, talk about the genesis of the book.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. So, as you mentioned, you and I worked at Gainsight. I've had a long career working with customers and leading customer-facing organizations that have really turned into a career. And you mentioned what the Gainsight team has done. I'm ever grateful, having worked with people like Dan Steinman and Nick Mehta for what they've done in helping to develop awareness of the importance of having a customer-facing executive role. I worked at companies that worked for a long time at Intuit, which was great at experience design and software, making products like TurboTax and QuickBooks. Yeah. And I ran their payroll service. the
Oh my.
operational execution of their payroll service. And my big aha was that you could apply those same design principles that Intuit was really developing and leading, that made the software so easy,
Mm-hmm.
to service experiences, to a handoff when you signed up for your payroll service, getting started when you wanted to expand and buy our forms or our automated payroll solutions, to the renewal process, to how you got support. And so that was a real important moment for me of saying, hey, I've got
Yeah.
this experience designing, working at a company that really focused on making the experience great for customers. And you could do that in services touch points where you had this recurring revenue business. And since then, I've taken post-sale leadership roles at companies including Ring Central, Marketo,
Mm-hmm.
Gainsight, and helping customer-facing executives define best practices for what this type of role is.
Yeah.
And sorry.
Okay. Let's hold that moment. So you've had your journey in leadership in and amongst these really, I mean, the companies you're naming off, Ring Central, Marketo, Gainsight, most, if not all, I think all have exited in one way or another, which now we have to define what an exit means. So those of you who are listening, we talk a lot about, we'll say SaaS, but that doesn't mean me back talking. That means software as a service. Of course it does. We talk a lot about software, but we talk shorthand a lot of the times about some of the things, like you say CCO. Anybody else like, what the heck is that?
Mhm.
But then we might talk about ProServe, professional services. We might talk about sales engineering, all these different kinds of roles. But Rod, what I think is really important is that I'm going to try to reframe it in my own words. You have been a leader in all these different organizations that have had this characteristic of caring for the customer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that fair to say, that angle of,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to bring
Yeah.
in customer education here, because this thread I want us to pursue with our audience today is about the human side of the business. And it's almost in a way, I was just listening to NPR, and they were talking about the emergence of, this sounds wackadoodle, I know. This is how my brain works. The emergence of a lot more of these unions and groups that are helping people organize, and this customer sense of, it's almost like even you see customer groups emerge sometimes organically around a product that they love. I know I'm in a Slack forum that has a special section around a vendor's product because we care so much about the product, and we talk about the product and then bring that back to the product as like the voice of our own voice of being customers. You know what I mean? So like the thing that I'm trying to say is that the customer, for me as a customer education leader, is the end all and be all of my job. And I'm always thinking from a leadership perspective now, more and more, the more tools I have and the more authority I might receive at an organization, to take that voice and say, Rod, you're my customer and you matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to bring your interest and questions and need for education, needs for support, and need for help, and need for just somebody who is a CSM to call me and help me out of my doldrums. It's like, now we have a leader that focuses 100%. Is that an accurate interpretation in my own weirdo way?
I believe so. I believe the customer education leaders have an incredible responsibility for their companies and an ability to affect not just the financial results, but also how their customers are perceived. I ran education organizations both at Marketo and Gainsight. And I want to share a story of my time at Marketo because I think it's really relevant, right? Our customer education team didn't just think about its role as teaching customers how to use the software. What made Marketo different, and I think a leader in its field, was that we were teaching a whole generation of digital marketers how to do their jobs because their bosses didn't know, they may have come out of Procter and Gamble and Clorox and brand organization. They didn't know how to use digital media and marketing automation platforms to message to customers. And so we were teaching our marketers about the context of why digital marketing was so important. And we built a certification program so that people could sort of get a stamp of approval from Marketo, but prove to their managers and their bosses that they were good at what they did. And this helped like thousands and thousands of folks become advocates for your company, not just because they knew how to use their product, because they felt sort of endeared to you because you helped them build a career. And that was also, you know, you and I have had that experience with Gainsight of being part of that customer success and the post-sale leadership community evolving, where there was a whole peer network and we were all learning together. And I think the role of customer education leaders can have that type of impact in so many categories of software. And even in industries that are not technology or software related, you know, this passion that they bring is, you know, is very visceral, and I think is super important.
I like how you're pulling customer education into this, because I wanted to talk way beyond just customer education, but it was a thread for me that's really important. And I'm glad you brought this up. I'm looking at the chat here, and I'm seeing Angel. Thanks, Angel, for jumping in. He was talking about how we're not just SaaS, but any recurring revenue subscription model now. And then Mike D. Mike, how you doing? He was on some podcasts recently, teaching a generation of digital marketers how to do their job. That was great. All of this stuff, like what we've seen, like I've been following the thread on this whole thing and thinking about how I want to really laser into. With all that said, yes, customer education leaders are starting to see this. Wow, we're training people to do their jobs better. Now we have all these tools that we're trying to bring to bear in a digital subscription economy, and now we need a leader. Okay, this is the thread. Let me take it from here. I am Rod. I have been an emerging leader over the last decade in my craft, in my field. I could be anybody. I could be in professional services. I could be in support. I can be in customer success. I might be creeping up on a title, which is director, senior director, VP someday, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is a good thread to pursue. And why your book is important to me and others is how do I have more impact? Because here's my shtick. As a customer education leader, everything you just said to me is important. I'm looking at NRR, ARR, GRR. I'm looking at churn. I'm looking at adoption. I'm looking at retention. I'm looking at why me? Why does Dave care about this stuff? Dave cares about this stuff because I feel like I have what, as you said, the DNA of the characteristic of what a CCO brings to the table in a whole, in the gestalt. That I'm already going to other leaders and saying, I need to learn about our product. Okay, I'm hanging out with the product team, the product marketing team, product marketing managers, and best friends. I have a relationship there. Mm-hmm. That's huge, because once that organization trusts this role that I have, then they realize they unlock an opportunity and a channel to the customers, which they may have not had in the same way before. It might have been more contentious, right? Oh, product release some stuff, and oh God, now I got to use it. But education is that framework of saying, yeah, we released some stuff, but we also released a bunch of guidance on how to use it and why to use it and what the best practices are around that. And that's a dance, right? Mm-hmm. But to get that unlocked, I'm also working with my CSMs who are post sales now. And they have a different spin on stuff. So how do I pull that in? Then I'm working with support who's like, well, gosh, darn it. Like, we have all these calls and they're ridiculous. And this is such a leadership function. And it goes up to your role as a CCO. Is like, I could see myself getting that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I want to stop there and let's go into the historical stuff. Like, why'd you write the book?
Yeah. Well, as you just described, I wrote the book for a person just like you, for people in management roles, in evolving leadership roles that are trying to figure out what do they need to do to get to the next level. And through my experience, I talked to several dozen leaders and CCOs and CEOs and evolving leaders as I researched the book. And I have an approach that says that there are a particular set of skills, these 8 skills and strategies that leaders, customer-facing executives should be developing throughout their career to be able to be a successful CCO, or sometimes it is a title of a VP or an SVP, but has a scope of responsibility across the various, what I call post-sale teams: professional services, customer education, support, success management. And in the book, I outline lots of tips and strategies that whatever level of organization you're at, that you can be thinking about to build out those skills, right? And we'll talk about a few of them, whether it's communication and storytelling, whether it's thought leadership.
Yeah, the ones that I brought this on from the book. I love this diagram.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of skills you're talking about, right?
Yeah, these are the skills, right? It's definitely the outcomes, right? You talked about you need to be focused on what I call the metrics that matter, and how do you operationalize those. But there are also common skills that a customer-facing executive needs to have. And whether it's customer education leaders, professional services leaders, success management team leaders, like they all can be developing those. So I believe that any of those folks can, evolve into and grow into this chief customer officer role. Did you know that the CCO role is the 7th fastest growing C-level role out of more than 50 that are tracked on LinkedIn? Yet there's only 4,000 chief customer officers in the world, where there's 57,000 chief marketing officers. There's over 200,000 chief financial officers. So my hope is that this book and lots of folks in our community can help build a bigger pipeline of customer-facing leaders who are ready to take on this important executive role.
Okay. I really want to laser down into this, because Rod, as I was reading the book over the last week and picking out some of the themes, it actually was really easy for me to absorb, because of course I've been reading a lot of books like this, but then I see the structure, the layout, now I see what is the role, how do I get to that role? And the thing that I liked most about reading this is that I could see a future for me. Not necessarily that I could see myself tomorrow as a CCO, but what's really bothered me over the years is I didn't quite understand that, and I didn't always feel like I had an advocate for me in the kind of work that I'm doing. Except, I had certain people that I met. Like, let's talk. I want to get to the responsibilities and like the how and the why, but I remember talking with Dan Steinman from Gainsight at an offsite where it was an executive offsite, and we were all there to do planning and stuff. And just sitting there listening and talking to Dan kind of broke my brain in a way, because the things he was talking about weren't the normal leadership things. They were really interesting. And they were this thread of how do we make the product easier, or how do we go to the market in a unique way to teach people what the things are. And I hear that our customers are struggling in this way, and I want to connect a solution to that. Oh, here's Dave. Dave's got a team, and now Dave, go out, talk to all the other people and figure out what the problems are, and talk to our customers. And for me, I've seen this emergence of this leader, and one thing that I haven't always seen is how can I talk with them? How can I transact with them? I want to learn more, right? What I really like to have you do is tell me a little bit more, because I even read the book and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. What is the real mission of our CCO? Mm-hmm. What are they there to do? Because I work with our CCO and I see it, but I want to hear it in words again. Like, this is the role. It's really expansive. It could be bigger. It could be littler, depending on the size of your company. What's the core?
Yeah. I would say the core of being a CCO is, having responsibility for the customer-facing interactions that your company has with its customers. And increasingly now that involves the operational execution of this, right? Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, There was a CCO, it was very infrequently used, and they were basically responsible for sending out net promoter surveys, gathering feedback, and then trying to influence other organizations to deliver results. Well, that's changed because now CCOs and these VP and SVP roles, they have actual teams that can be working directly with customers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're increasingly accountable for financial results, whether it's driving revenue through retention and expansion, whether it's operating margin through professional services teams, whether it's enabling companies to grow without adding headcount that customer education teams are contributing to. And so they're responsible for being the advocate of the customer into those executive discussions and decision making. And they increasingly have responsibility for functional teams in SaaS, in technology SaaS. It often includes a professional services or implementation team,
Mm-hmm.
support organization, a success management team, customer education and certification. Sometimes there's a customer operations team, and increasingly now there's community, customer marketing, sometimes part of it. But I would say those are the core organizations. And there's some common metrics that they often are responsible for at sort of the executive and board level that measure the impact. A lot of that is focused on retention rates, how much you're able to keep your customers, how much you're able to grow them, which is often called net retention, how much you retain.
Uh-huh. NRR.
And then there's profitability, thinking about your cost to deliver, which is becoming increasingly important with what's happening in the economy now, particularly around technology companies where they're trying to conserve cash, be much more aware of how much it costs to deliver services to each of their customer segments. So it's a big set of responsibilities. And I think that CCOs should be stepping up more to say, hey, I own these metrics and I'll be accountable for those.
Okay. That's a really good setup. Let me ask you this question. So it's almost as if we have, let's imagine an organization, we have, 5, 6 leaders at that C level. You have your CEO, you have your COO, they're in charge of operations. You have your maybe CRO, revenue, CMO, marketing. Then we can get in weird ones, but those are the core, right? Now, it feels like to me that's kind of parting off some of the responsibilities we're sharing them. Is that like, how does that leader constellate amongst the leadership C-suite or executive suite? It's not just, it's because you have VPs, you have other roles in there. Are they coming in, Rod? Are you seeing this? Because you're looking at the bigger macro picture. Are you seeing the emergence of this trend? And then they're going spidering out and going, oh, I got this part. Just like you said, I got this part. And then those other leaders can drill down more laser focus while you have somebody representing the whole of the customer.
Yeah. Well, since I left Gainsight 2 years ago, I've been leading my consulting company, Hello CCO. And when I work with clients that are chief customer officers, I tend to find that they need to be able to work successfully cross-functionally. A lot of the results that they need to deliver involve resources or influences from other organizations. So it makes their job a little bit more complicated, perhaps, than a product team who owns all of the product managers and the engineers, or an IT team that owns all the resources. So that in order to achieve their outcomes, they do need to work cross-functionally, which is an important skill. So I think that there are things that they uniquely own, and then they need to build out strategies for working cross-functionally, prioritization of resources to be able to achieve those goals. And ultimately, the role they play on the field is that they are representing the voice of the customer into some of these other functions, right? The product team may not have a great understanding of how customers are using their product or service, but because the CCO manages the implementation and professional services team, they're potentially working all day, every day with new and existing customers. Or the customer education team is hearing what customers want to learn. Or the success management team and support team are hearing what customers are struggling with. So they need to be the voice into lots of other organizations. So I believe it's an incredibly valuable role at these companies?
I like this, and it's actually becoming a lot more clear to me. I hope it is for our audience too, because I feel like, sorry, I left your little banner up there. What I've been really interested in is, okay, so I'm a customer education leader, but one of the palpable problems that I've had to overcome in my career is, who is my advocate, right? Because is it my COO or CRO? Like, who do I report to as an education leader? Because I always felt, and what I'm saying here is that I'm kind of thinking that this role, the chief customer officer, is almost the best position for me to hook on to. And this is why. And when I talk about maybe some responsibilities and things, well, let me bring up that chart again, because how do I add this? Oh yeah, never mind. I know my tools here. So let's look at this. One of the things that I think is super cool about how you add this into the book and layer it into the responsibilities, and I'm going to just take me as an example. Let's say pretend Dave wants to be like Christine's option, like the CEO is a conductor of an orchestra. I'm going to talk about Donna Weber here too, and orchestration and onboarding and stuff. Look, that's all in it. Okay, so what I want to do is this. I was sitting there last night again, kind of like looking at myself and looking at the dartboard and going, I've moved up in my career slowly, but I've gotten there, and now I'm director level. Now I'm overseeing a lot more, and I have different functions under me, but I work a lot with other teams. As I've worked, here's a really good example. Let's go to outreach, where I was in my last position. And I worked under Mike Zinni, who now is the chief customer officer there. And I watched Mike, and I learned from Mike, and I talked a lot with Mike, and I watched what he was doing. And because I was kind of niched down, I didn't always see the day-to-day, but I understood and watched what he did. Hey, we're connecting with a customer, right? What does that mean? I know my customers. I talk to them. I know their problems. I know the above the line leaders who might be directors and stuff, maybe some managers and other people that work there and work with the product. Let's see. Gosh, all these roles are so hard to do in different ways, but they're all kind of interrelated, right? So impact is, do I have a learning objective? Do I have an outcome of what I was trying to help a customer with? Do they use the product and successfully? Maybe not happily, but successfully. How do I connect to that? And that is talking with them and talking sometimes at them through thought leadership and ideas and ingratiating yourself into the online community. Well, let's go around the rim. Strategic impact. Now, this is, Rod, where I'll talk about the Service Rocket program. And in Service Rocket, what we do for education is we offer a lot of different kinds of services, one being advisory. So the role that I have often is strategic thinking, where I'm living here, going to customers as a third-party consultant now. But if I were to do that internal organization I have, my job is to evangelize, to help people understand that these new tools we're bringing into place, like we have a new support site, we have a new education program, we have whatever, that's change management. And me, as my role as a leader, that's a couple stories down in a core organization, I have to say, hey, I'll give attribution to Don again. If you build it, they won't come. And that applies to even my internal organization. Let's say I built an academy, and it's really cool. But if I have 24 CSMs in my organization that are not aware of it, they're still training customers on one-to-one calls. Mm-hmm. So that CCO level activity is, hey, we built this thing and you're going to use it now, right? We're going to connect across the organization to share the tooling and to explain what that is and to evangelize for it. Mm-hmm. So it's like internal thought leadership, but it's definitely strategic thinking. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a pause there before I go around the rim. Am I tracking with understanding of how I'm seeing that CCO role applying throughout?
Yeah, I believe that customer education leaders should report directly to a CCO and not to one of the functional leaders that might report to a CCO. One of the skills that I talk about in the book and then I work with my clients on to help them have better impact and get better results, is this communication and storytelling, where the customer education leader, let's say, is delivering great results. Maybe they have data that shows that their customers that take training are using more of the product, or they're retaining and expanding their relationship with your company at a higher rate than customers that don't have training. But what they're struggling with is, how do they tell the stories publicly so that other parts of the organization, their peers, the executive level team, sees the impact that the customer education organization is having on the business results, and making those connections between the work that they do and the outcomes that are important for companies. And so in the book, for example, and when I work with clients, we talk about not just how to build out a customer education program and deliver results. And I'll give a particular example of how we're doing that in a minute, but also how to communicate it in a way so that it doesn't get buried in the noise of the company, right? Encouraging leaders to speak at an all hands meeting, find ways to speak at your company kickoff about the stories that you're learning from your customers. And even within your teams, all right, in peer organizations, how do you bring this to life? It's not about charts that show a little bit more. It's about, how you had a company that hadn't been trained, and then once they did, what they were able to do differently. This storytelling is a really important skill of an evolving leader. And that's very different than just putting data on a PowerPoint slide.
Okay, I want to catch that thread and run with it a little bit, because some of the things you're telling me here, this all makes sense, and I think it underlies or underscores a frustration that's been building for me and others for many years. Let's talk about. I want to talk about Gainsight a little bit, because, gosh, I remember our leaders there, particularly Dan and Nick and others. Storytelling was a big part of the day, every day. They would come around to all the offices, or we'd have all hands or whatever. And I think something that I learned and I really took to heart is, you could be on a train. Let's think about, I really like to use startups and emerging companies as a good frame of reference for the entire market, because a startup could represent a product or a suite of products or an entire organization, doesn't matter. And also, if you're a larger company, let's say, Google, releases a new product, ChatGPT. We're not going to go there today, sorry. But that is an entity. It's like human beings bring some concept or idea that's software to life. But that software itself is sterile and dead until the human beings surrounding it in an organization that's emerging around it can tell the story about it. But the problem is, we've not had that main storyteller in chief, right? The CCO, the customer officer. They're like, we're building this darn thing for a customer, someone to use it. Everything we do should be faced on the customer. Why I'm saying that with passion is, Rod, because I've been in organizations in the heat of battle, right? The battle that we have is the day-to-day. God, we got to get this done. We got to get this product out the door. We got to get this implementation done. We've got a support problem. I've got to build a new academy. I've got an escalation. You lose sight, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this role, that storyteller, when I'd see Dan come around and go, all right, it's story time. We're going to talk about this client. And this client had one person in the company, and that person embraced our product and did all these crazy things. And look what they built, and look what they built. And they did this on their own time. And they're bringing that back at story time at Gainsight, and we're like, oh man, that feels so good. And it means that they're also helping to advocate for us internally as workers that are bringing the programs to life. Mm-hmm. And that gets lost sometimes, because the story of the human struggle and all things we got to do, professional service is not easy, support is not easy, none of these things are easy. Then now you're helping build those relationships internally too.
Yeah.
Right.
What I find so interesting about this is that customer education leaders are by definition storytellers. They're trying to help, they're literally training and educating adult learners. And so they have to, they already innately.
What are you saying? We have to have stories to learn?
Which they do, which is so interesting. So they create all these great stories for their customers. But I do think that as a body, we struggle to tell stories to our peers and our executive teams that demonstrate the impact of what we're doing with our customers. Now, I do have an example of a client that we worked with, that had a particular business problem they wanted to solve. They needed to support companies' growth. They were a relatively large software provider in the information security space, but they couldn't hire more customer success managers and support people to support growth. So they needed to build out their academy. And so we worked with their education team and their education leaders to build out learning paths and to make it more interesting. And we were importantly tracking the results. And we were able to show that customer onboarding, the time for customer onboarding was decreased by 75%, right? Which would be great. But how do you get that information out? So we worked with their marketing team to put out a blog on their customer marketing website. We worked with the software vendor that they had purchased, and the software vendor wrote a case study. Then they were, sort of promoted in some of the, in the materials. So they started to get out the story that customer education could have a big company impact, both on customers and on the financial results. It was self-service, so you didn't need people involved, and you could do it at scale. And so how do you not only deliver results, but measure the results and then find ways to tell the stories in a compelling way so that people get it?
That's a really helpful story, Rod, because I feel like customer education teams are essentially the spirit of what a CCO does in some contexts. Maybe that's what you're trying to communicate or convey here, is that the function that I play, Brad, is difficult because, I'll look back at your diagram here and the 8 dimensions that you're talking about. If I go around the ring, and I think we can all learn from this, like it's not unique to me. I think we all do this, but for me, it's palpably there in front of my face every single day. If I'm not connecting to the customer, like I have to talk to the people, the end users of the product. For example, I was doing an engagement recently, and I say to my company, okay, give me a list of some of the best customers and the worst customers and the middling customers that you have. Give me a sample set of people. I'm going to go talk to them. What? Wait, what? No, I want to go talk to your customers. I want to issue some surveys to a broader audience. I want to go talk to your customers. I want them to know I'm part of your organization as a consultant, but my job is to build a relationship with them right now. And that's kind of novel, because and this is what I do internally as this role, or as me as Service Rocket now. I do that. And then I bring that back and say, hey, here's what your customer's talking about. They have a problem with this. And why does Dave do that? Why does the CCO do that? Well, because I want to build a safe space for a customer to say, and this is important. Like, you don't think you should have to do this, but building a safe place for a customer to bring these emergent problems and challenges and things they want to do and dreams they might have around your product is one of the most important things, because this fluidity happens between you and your product team then. And now it's a customer-led growth in a certain way. So that's huge. And then, okay, so that's that. Let's go to number 2, thought leadership. For me as an education leader, I'm always doing thought leadership. And it's not something that many of us do consistently because it's hard. But hey, I have released a new module or a new academy, and I saw some data and I said, hey, 77% of all customers that take our training and our academy have these successful outcomes versus those who don't. Wow, that's storytelling too. Then going around the room, like change management. It's hard to believe, but as a customer education leader, I have to do change management in my org. And what it means to me is, and this is where I would love to have executive insight and help, because an executive has the authority to say, hey, everybody, hey, this is all corporate all hands. You're going to be seeing Dave show up. When he comes knocking on your door or zooming in on a call, can you listen to him? And can you give him the time of day? Because what he's doing is helping show what we as an executive leader have said that it's a strategic chess piece for us. We built the academy, or we built a micro learning thing, or we built a campaign in conjunction with marketing and product. And then these are tools for a web of things for our customers. But you need to use them, because if our team isn't positioning those tools and helping connect with customers in, like you're talking about the CSM scenario. I think Sandy Lynn, I'll give her some attribution, said in a post around how one customer education person can help support 10 CSMs and their ability to scale knowledge. So that's important. Okay, that's the change management. We're getting our organization aligned strategically to use these tools that we have that can help customers help themselves.
Yeah. And can I give an example?
Yes, please. Right there, I'm getting tired.
What I do in the book is help give lots and lots of stories and anecdotes about how people can use the stuff that is happening in their companies all the time, but as a deliberate way of developing certain skills. So change management can happen all the time. You might have a new product that's coming out, and you have to think about how do you support the change, this introduction of a new product or service with your organization, while also making sure you don't forget about your old customers. Or you're focused on a new segment, right? You might hear at your company kickoff in the last month. A lot of companies are doing that. Hey, we're going to focus on our enterprise clients, or we're going to try to get more companies in a particular industry. Like, that is change management as well. And so how do you shift your organization's resources to support your company goals, and then go back to your executive team and demonstrate how the work that you did helped your company release a new product, or support this new enterprise segment, or expand into a new geography. So what I'd encourage, the folks that are going to be listening to this is find ways to align the work that you're doing to your company goals, and then tell people about it. Right? You talked earlier about thought leadership. I actually don't think thought leadership is all that hard. I'm not talking about writing a book. Like, that's a big deal. But people can share what they're learning with their organization in so many, informal, low risk ways that you're just getting practice, because you're an expert, right? You're seeing how all of your customers are using the product, or what they're doing in the academy, or what they're struggling with in onboarding. Share that and let other people learn. And that can be thought leadership as well. And then as you become more senior, go find opportunities, talk at a meetup, or, lead a breakout session at your company kickoff. And you just get practice in sharing your information with others. Doesn't need to be brilliant, doesn't need to be earth shaking. It's just having a point of view and sharing it.
I really like that. I think that brings back what thought leadership isn't, and helps focus on what it is and how we can use it. Because I know when I'm on C-Lab and I'm talking with Adam Evermescu, we bring up the point of thought leadership, and people say, "You're thought leaders," and I'm like, okay. It's a tainted phrase in some ways, because I think some people have abused it. But exactly how you identified it or characterized it is important. It's not hard. It's communicating factual, helpful, important information, but on a regular cadence or sequence of delivery. So maybe this is important to talk about too, because as a CCO, let me ask you this question. Do you think that that role, I already do this today. I have my several channels on LinkedIn and YouTube and whatever, where I'm always putting stuff out to the world around my industry and my product and my company. Do you feel like that's one of the accountabilities of a CCO, is to be visible and seen and heard?
I think it can be. It depends on, who your CEO is, what your product and service sells. I do believe that they need to be a thought leader and a visible presence. And it may be on LinkedIn. It may be at company all hands. It may be at external conferences. It may be at industry meetups. I do believe that they should have some presence and a point of view, so that their prospects and customers are hearing from them, and they're hearing that there is an advocate for them on the executive decision-making team at that company. I do believe that it makes a connection. I'm not sure that it's critical, depending on who your CEO is. right? Like, even going back to Gainsight, like
Yeah.
Nick is very much, has been, at least to date, the face of Gainsight, and so was Dan Steinman when he
Uh-huh.
was there, and Kelly Capote does that today. So I think it can be, but it doesn't need to be. But they should
Okay.
have presence with their customers in some way.
Yeah. So what is I look at that role now increasingly so as someone I might be able to transact with as a person, as a user of a platform, to say, okay, I have this really big thing and I have a really big problem. Maybe I might connect with that person on a point of escalation. Maybe, before we only have so many minutes left, and we can go over because this isn't a hard stop thing, but I try to be accommodating. Can you tell me more now that we're getting into those kind of responsibilities? We talked about thought leadership. What are the other key things that if I were tracking to become a chief customer officer, that I should be looking at building into my career? And let me phrase this, and this is really attractive to me in a lot of contexts because I, as an education leader, have commonly been frustrated because I think my mission aligns quite well with the CCO. I tell people that my job is about putting a warm hug around our customers. My job as an education leader is to say, you need to know how to use this thing. And a customer cannot just be a customer canonically, I'm out there, I'm paying, but a partner who is trying to learn the product just like a customer is, but also having to be an authority on it, or an internal employee who darn well better be an authority on the platform. So I look at customers as very broad, and that I use the term customer education. I'm using it in the broadest possible context, meaning that it is a corporate, is a universal function that assimilates many of the functions that we think about in education. So that means enablement. I look at that as an adjunct to my role. L&D, I often look at that as an adjunct to my role. Could these all be subsumed under one leader? Maybe. But what are the things I'm not doing, Rod? What are the other roles that are the other things that I should be building up some chops, some muscle tissue with to eventually aspire to that leadership position?
Well, that's basically how I've structured the book, around these 8 skills to develop. And this
Mm-hmm.
concept of the maturity model that you showed up earlier, these 8 strategies,
Yeah.
gives an individual an opportunity to see where they are on these 8
All
strategies,
right, let me
right?
put that up here.
You can sort of rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 as you go through the book, and maybe even ask your manager, where do you think you are on a scale of 1 to 10 for each of these? And then, in any particular, calendar year, fiscal year, what are the areas that you'd like to work on? You're likely to have strengths that you can lean into and take advantage of. And then there might be other areas that are important for your personal development, or for your manager to see, to give you added responsibility or promotion, that you can align on. Hey, this, I need to be better at connecting with customers. And then in the book, I lay out different ways that you can do that. Maybe you can actually come up with specific, hey, I'd like to develop relationships with 5 of our largest customers. I'd like to set up a customer advisory board. I'd like to do 6 site visits to better understand how our customers are using our product. Like, some of these are kind of obvious, but not everybody is engaged with customers at a C level as you would think.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of them, is focusing on particular areas. And I would say the second one in general is delivering a pattern of repeatable results. People get promoted to leadership and to an executive level when the CEO or someone else feels like they can be counted on to deliver the results for their organization that they're expected to do, whether that's revenue growth, whether it's profitability growth, whether it's customer experience. And so I have a model for, how well does your CEO feel like you are able to deliver these results in a repeatable way? And having a play, having points of view, having best practices that you've applied before that have worked, being proactive. These are all characteristics of executives that are being successful in taking on increasingly larger roles.
That's incredible. And yeah, this is okay. You have clearly showed the value prop of the book to me with the context of that developing me at my career. So Thanks for that. I mean, I want to open up and shift to some questions from the audience now, if I can. But I feel really good about where this book is going. After reading through it, it actually contextualized a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. Oh, these are good examples. And yeah, it's funny because, Rod, it struck me as you're right. A lot of this stuff is common sense. It's obvious. But who owns a lot of this stuff, right? And I think the emergence of the role has been to take ownership of these, not complete ownership, but at least stewardship. Maybe that might be a good word, of the things that matter. Like you talked about optimizing metrics. If I've got my NRR and my GRR and my churn rate and my adoption rate and all these things, and I got them on a dashboard and I'm looking them quarterly and I'm seeing them go up, and I know how my different teams have influenced and impacted that number, which is a hard thing to get to. Um, I've done a pretty good job, even if those might be negative, but I'm tracking them quarter to quarter and impacting them. And that's why, I mean, maybe that was what Gainsight did for me, is really helped me to understand that data and the interpretation of the data, the human connection with other people, the stories, the talking with other teams, internal, external, thinking about change management, but then charting the course like a captain of a ship to say, we got to get churn down. Well, now I'm going to orchestrate an activity and help tell the story of what our churn is and help work with all these other teams internally to drive the ship. And that now, so the last question I have, I guess, an audience, I'm going to tee you up for a big question. So give us a question. We'll ask this last one of him, is how does that emergence of a CCO impact the other C-level roles? Is it you just have somebody show up and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we fight? Or is it kind of more of an organic thing that you've seen in the past?
Well, what I've seen is as a company gets to a certain size, maybe $50 million in revenue, 500 to 750 employees, they kind of get big enough where I believe that they could and should have a C-level role that is responsible for the customer-facing activities. Often they'll have like a VP or director level, even if it reports to CEO. But what those peers are looking for is somebody who is operating at that executive level, that can be accountable for the responsibilities that they have, that they can count on for results, right? Count on the sales team to sell, count on product team to get product out, count on the customer team to deliver great experiences to customers and tie it all together. So they need to be held accountable, and that they're also looked to for advice. In the chapter about building out customer relationships, I talk about some stories, or I think about my own time at Marketo, building relationship with my sales peer, which had a lot of friction when I started. And Phil Fernandez, the CEO, was explicit, hey, you need to help rebuild the relationship between our enablement and education team and sales. And so you can be really conscious about, solving that, but they expect these strong relationships that you're working together to achieve company level goals. So you have to figure out how to do that without being told what to do, right? You're at a C level, you shouldn't be expecting the CEO to be saying, hey, you need to do this and this. It could be as quick as, there's a lot of friction between sales and your team. Go figure it out. Right? And that's a lot of what I tried to pull together in the book, is stories about how to achieve these outcomes that give evolving leaders a very actionable framework for achieving the challenges that they see in their day-to-day. And if people want to have questions, I'd be happy to follow up. I work with a lot of clients to help improve business results, and also to help them, while they're doing that, grow their careers and get promoted. I had, even in the last 4 weeks, I've had 3 of my clients get promoted to CCO roles from a VP level roles. One, through a big reorg, took on a much larger scope of responsibility for managing customer-facing groups for one business unit to all 5 that had been acquired through acquisition. So that makes me really proud that they've had that impact. We've improved the results enough, and they're demonstrating those executive level skills.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. This is helpful. This is let's do this. One question was, and I think we already answered this from Evan Hall. Will this read well on Kindle? I think you said you're on Amazon Kindle as well.
It's on Kindle and paperback, and so you can download it on Kindle. It actually looks great on Kindle. I've
That's
bought
awesome.
it on Kindle. Yeah.
There you go, Evan. You got your answer. And again, if there are any more questions, we're going to bring it home here, and we do have time for probably one question left. Rod, we're already on LinkedIn, so people know how to contact you. You have your website, Hello CCO. What's the handle on or the URL for that?
HelloCCO.com.
.com. Okay, so it's easy to remember. HelloCCO.com. Anything else? Any hellos or anything you want to say to anybody on the way out the door?
No, I just encourage you to think about how you can be connecting the work that you're doing to the company outcomes that you're trying to deliver. And, I work with clients. If you want to set up a call with me, happy to talk with you about how to make that connection and how to potentially improve your business results and whatever of your post-sale functions you might be managing, so that you can both deliver those results and grow your career at the same time, and be able to tell those stories to your executive team that earns you that seat at the table.
Excellent. We did have one question, then I'll have to do my outro. So Angel has asked, what about getting startup CEOs to understand education? I mean, I'm reading that terribly. Getting startup CEOs to understand ed possibly is challenging. Any advice about that? So helping leadership understand education and the impact of it.
I think that goes to the ability to tell stories about how your customers are learning from the academy or training solutions that you're providing, and how it's translating into some better experiences or the results. I think the CEO has so many different responsibilities that if it's just showing charts of visitors to your training page or number of people that have started your certification or the amount of time they're spending, it's hard to make that connection. So you have to find ways to bring it to life. And, again, be happy to talk with folks if they want to reach out about telling those stories to their audiences. But I think that's the most compelling way. And that, whether your customer education, whether your services, implementation, I think that it all is the same thing. CEOs are very, very busy, and you can't just say, we're important. You have to make it memorable.
Good point. That's a really good point. Really good point, Rod. Okay. Well, because I experience that a lot. And coming from the outside now as a consultant, it's better. Because now a leader will listen to me more often than not, because I'm not 2 or 3 stories down in a silo. and I think that's a concept to bring out at the end too, is that when you're talking about a role, this kind of a role, you're helping lift people up out of a silo and give them that voice. Because what happens to me at every organization, I'll start high, then it'll spread and grow, and then I find my voice is, as an education leader, and this probably happens to every different role, is diluted. So we need an advocate internally to express the challenges that we're going up against for our customers for education.
Yeah.
All right, let's roll out on this. This is obviously my last pitch. You know where to contact Rod and how to talk to him if you need help and advice for your journey towards becoming a CCO, or you're just interested and curious. Go pick up the book today. The last thing I'll mention is that one of my missions here, which overlaps with some of the things that Rod has been talking about today, is to evangelize and spread thought leadership and help you out for customer education. We have a customer education program. I call it this first ever customer education as a service program. So, hey, you need help and advice. Folks like Rod are in our network, and we bring the best of breed to any problem that you have out there, strategic, instructional design, training, or otherwise. We're out to help, and helping is the most important thing. Okay, I will leave out on that note. Rod, once again, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time. Go up, pick out the book today and read it. It's helpful. If you want to aspire to a role like that, you definitely done a good job laying out and articulating a pathway to get there. So thanks, Rod.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody. I should always say my outro. We will be streaming pretty much regularly every week at this time and place. And if you're interested in getting on the show, reach out to me. We definitely have a lot of folks wanting to be on, and we will continue doing so as long as we can. So cheers, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.